Hello, Cupcakes, and welcome to another episode of Cupcakes Comics Reviews. This one's going to be a little bit different one, though, because we're not reviewing a comic book, but we're reviewing a movie based on a comic book. So to my left here, we have from Scotland, we have Connor Craig. Craig? Sorry.
Hello. That's all right. Oh, no.
It always trips me up.
Yeah, I'm very excited to speak about this movie. Get the thoughts out there. I don't know what Taylor thinks of this, so I'm very curious to hear what he's got to say as well.
I'm stoked to talk about it. So this is a momentous occasion in the MCU because this is the first time we've had a movie based purely 100% off of a Jack Kirby creation. All the other ones can be previously disputed. It was a beautiful sight to see based on the comics from Jack Kirby, or I don't know how they worded it, but regardless, it was nice to see his name on the screen by himself. Because even like the Thor movies will say Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby. Like he's like third in the line, which is crazy. But that's awesome. Cupcakes, if you're a long-time viewer, which please, if you're not, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like the video, comment down below with all your thoughts. But long-time Cupcakes fans, I don't know, what do we call our viewers? Will know that I'm a huge Jack Kirby fan. So it's great to have that opportunity to see something that's like purely his like like his creation. And I just recently actually read this run. I've been putting it off for so long, but I finally read it because I was invited onto a YouTube channel called Crack a Boom, where there's three people, and one guy read the current Kieran Gillen run, one person read the Neil Gaiman run, and then I read the Jack Kirby run, and we all talked about how they differ, how they're the same, and then what were our expectations leading to this movie. I'll put a link down below to that one if you want to hear my thoughts before that, because it might be interesting to contrast. But first, Connor, I want to hear your thoughts. What were your initial?
I want to hear my thoughts.
And before we get into this, just a warning: we're not going to do any spoilers first. We will give you a fair warning when we get into spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie yet, you're still free to watch the review, and then we'll warn you of the spoilers, and you can dip out, go through the movie, and then come back and finish. But first, Connor, what were your unspoilery thoughts?
So, unspoilery. I really loved it. I don't know how to start this other than saying that I genuinely do think it's my favorite Marvel film.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's another level.
Put that into context real fast, though. Like, you are an MCU fan, though, right?
Yeah. I do love the MCU. I've got like love hate, not like even a hate, just a love kind of. They're okay. I think the MCU across the board, it'd be a lie to say that they're not like a consistent quality. You know, I'm not someone that thinks any of them are really bad. I even enjoy like Thor Dark World for certain aspects of it. I think that they're all kind of have something on offer. I think that why this one would be my favorite though is because I feel like it's the first time I felt there was some meat to the bone, like proper. Now I know, like I say that, and comparing it to Infinity War Endgame, the meat on those bones was like spectacle. You're seeing so much happen for the first time, stuff that shouldn't be possible, you know.
Yeah.
But this one was like breaking it down to like story. There was, you know, their stories were built on the weight of characters and they're all coming together. This one was just built differently. I thought it asked different questions. I thought it challenged me. I would probably like, as a movie fan as well, like if I was to go and review it as a standard film, I still would have liked to ask more of myself, like challenge me a bit more. But in regards to the Marvel movies, if I'm comparing them, this is the one that I liked most for making me active throughout the film and thinking about it rather than just turning off my brain and just seeing what's on screen. I sat there kind of running with Makari in the movie, trying to figure everything out, figure out how I feel, and you know, but yeah, overall, like I loved it. I understand some of the criticism, but I think that we've had other movies in this genre that have maybe tried to do the same things and not landed as well.
Like what?
Well, I think like I've seen a lot of comparisons to Civil War. Now, I'm not being controversial when I say this. I would actually say Civil War is one of my maybe if not my favorite Marvel film, but it's one of the ones I have the most problems with. I have a deep love for Civil War because the emotion throughout the movie is really well done. It doesn't challenge you in the way that I think Eternals does, but there's a lot of challenging moments. And it was the first time as well. Like Winter Soldier kind of teased it, but it was the first time it didn't expect you to just kind of sit there. You had to kind of think about things. But my problem with Civil War is that the plot, the minute you think about something, kind of like the Baron Zemo going to the super soldier base and stuff. When you think about it, it kind of, for me, it kind of falls apart, and it always kind of tarnishes the movie a little bit for me. So like, because the thing is, so to break it down better, Civil War is about like the Avengers kind of breaking up as a family and stuff, and like their emotions in regards to each other and what they do and if it's right or wrong, whatever. But three-quarters way through that movie, it abandons that plot, and then as much as I love this, the third act, it is just takes in this. It's now just Bucky, Tony, and Cap. Like it's just them, and it throws out the previous arguments the movie was having. Okay, maybe they're kind of similar, but it doesn't connect as well per se. This movie does what the first two acts of Civil War does, but across the whole thing, and I felt that it really found its way to, like, I was really satisfied by the ending of this movie. I thought that they really pulled off that type of storytelling.
Yeah, I think so. I loved it as well. Those are my initial thoughts.
I know. Tell us your thoughts. Tell us your thoughts now.
Yeah, so I loved it as well, and I had some people ask me because they know I'm a big Kirby fan. They're like, before, like when the trailers and stuff are coming out and like the images, they're like, does this upset you that this doesn't look like Kirby? And I was like, Kirby's a lot deeper than that. I know, like, obviously he's an artist, so aesthetic is like the first thing you would notice. Which I think there was still a lot of Kirby aesthetic involved. Not like so blatantly obvious, but when you read a lot of Kirby, you can notice things like a lot of the I'm terrible with character names. The character that was doing all the tech and inventions and stuff. What's his?
Fastos.
Yes. So like a lot of the tech that he was doing looked like Kirby tech. And a lot of the costumes at least played tribute enough to the Kirby costumes that I like, they're recognizable. Like it wasn't like completely. And then the Celestial itself was just like, I mean,
Yeah.
Kirby. Like maybe the colors were a little bit more muted, but other than that, like it was a Kirby all the way. My initial thoughts about this entire phase of the MCU is that, like, I think I'm going to end up loving this phase. I've been a big fan of the MCU, and I actually did a podcast reviewing every MCU movie with my friend Alex, and it was called Podcast Prevails. I think it's still on iTunes if you want to listen to it. And we reviewed every MCU movie, and then like every other episode, we'd review like a different superhero movie to kind of put into context and stuff. And there was very few MCU movies that I didn't like. So like Thor: The Dark World's probably like, that's probably the only one that I'll say like I have almost no interest in rewatching. I probably will rewatch it at some point when I go through another big reading or watching order or whatever. But other than that, I've pretty much either really enjoyed or loved most other MCU movies. So that's the context of what I'm putting this in. And the fact that I love Kirby. So my expectations were pretty high going into this. And this phase of Marvel reminds me so much of like 70s Marvel comics. And that's something that I've been talking about too, is like something I've been diving into because it's such a fascinating time for me. And I think it's such a great analogy. So I'm gonna make it here. But like 60s Marvel was like huge, right? It's like this huge revolutionary thing. Like it was, comics existed before it, but Marvel like put it on another level, and like having all the interconnected universe, having the big, stage debuts of guys that had been around for a while, like Kirby and Ditko, Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, even. So that was like huge for the 60s. The 70s came around, and that was like the first time we had seen guys that were Marvel fans now writing Marvel comics. So guys like Roy Thomas, Jim Starlin, Steve Englehart, and Steve Gerber. Those like were the four guys that were like huge fans of 60s Marvel. Now they were writing 60s or 70s Marvel, and some of them were doing art. But at that point in 70s Marvel, they're playing with house money. Like 60s Marvel is so big, the fans were so invested that they could pretty much do anything. So 70s Marvel is like this weird decade of comics. Like it's when Marvel gets its weirdest, because they're just throwing everything at the wall. And not to mention that some of the aforementioned writers were openly experimenting with drugs and passing around ideas in the room while they're writing these books. So things get even weirder just based on that. But you get like weird, like cosmic stuff with Starlin. You get weird ideas. Even the Eternals was in the 70s with Kirby, which who did not do drugs, but he, and which is kind of amazing with the ideas that he had. But like that also just played into like the weirdness of the 70s was that Kirby came in and wanted to do the story of the Eternals that had nothing to do with the Marvel universe. He's like, I just want to create my own thing, right? Like he just got done doing with the New Gods and DC. He wanted to come in and do his own thing, and then eventually there were some editorial mandates where they made him like really force and pigeonhole some Marvel continuity in there, and those were the worst issues probably. But it wasn't until later runs that they really started to like, no, we need to make this the Eternals part of the Marvel universe. That's when you get like Gaiman's run. I think Walt Simonson, he did a short run in the 80s, I think, where they do some of that, and then like the Kieran Gillen run of today is really doing that. But so 70s Marvel is how I view this, because the MCU with the phases 1 through 3 were kind of like this new phenomenon. Like, yes, there were superhero movies beforehand, but this is when like they took superhero movies to another level where they're making $1 billion after $1 billion after $1 billion at the box office. And they did this thing that we'll never see. I will hold this to in our lifetimes. Someone take 20 plus movies and interconnect them in a way that's so satisfying, like we got like it with Endgame and stuff. I don't think we'll ever see that replicated. But because they have got so many people invested, you know, billions of dollars worth of people invested into this, they're playing with house money at this point. So now we're getting these weird ideas. It's like Guardians of the Galaxy was a weird idea by comparison of like Captain America and like Iron Man and stuff like that's when it got weird and it was successful. I think that was the first glimpse of Marvel saying like, I think we're onto something. I think we could put out anything and people will go see it. And that's not to take any merit away from the movies because they're great. But this now in this phase, we're doing like, we're getting different directors. We're getting more diverse directors and diverse voices, which is great too. It's like, we don't need to have a big name director on this. We could take a chance with an up and coming director that we meet with and we like their ideas and stuff like that. And we can put them into this movie here, that movie there. And the cast, let's get more diverse there. And this cast was like extremely diverse and it was amazing. I loved it. Like, and the thing that I loved about it the most was that you have all these different characters and cultures represented, but the cast itself worked so well together. Like, I was amazed that these people in their first movie together had such good chemistry. Like, we didn't see, like, that's one of my favorite things about the MCU is having this chemistry of like when Tony Stark meets Star-Lord for the first time, and you're like, what's that gonna be like? And it's such an interesting scene, and it's like fun, and it's cool to see those characters interact. And they did have some chemistry there, but like that chemistry was still built. Like, Chris Hemsworth wasn't really super comfortable in his role as Thor right away. It took him until like Ragnarok, Avengers, you know, that time period, where he really started to feel the character. But this was like right away. I feel like every character just jumped into their role. They knew what they wanted. Maybe this is a sign of the great director and the work that she did. But they were then, and just like the way they played off of each other was like as if they've been doing movies together for years. It was amazing. So that's one of the things I enjoyed the most. But as far as what this does to the MCU, I feel like we're just getting weirder and crazier and more out there. And I think eventually there's going to be some bombs here and there. Like, we can't just keep this ball rolling to where it's like constant hit after hit after hit. And and they've upped the ante of how much they're putting out with like the MCU shows on Disney Plus and whatnot. So there's going to be some bombs along the way, but I'm so here for it. I'm ready to take that ride regardless, even if there's some hiccups along the way.
I think you know, I agree with you. Like, you can't expect the fact they went so long without a bomb is ridiculous in itself, and it could, especially in the landscape of the last 20 years, as good as superhero movies have gotten as a genre, or comic book genre has gotten in regards to media, there's still been tons of bombs, and the fact that they managed to kind of fly their way through this entire saga and not hit one bomb is insane. There will be, the thing is, I was saying earlier, there's always going to be a bomb. It was gonna happen eventually. If this is the bomb, oh well. Like, if this is what Marvel do for a bomb, then they've got nothing to worry about. Because I mean, in comparison, watching Venom 2 a couple weeks ago, that's not bombed, but if we're comparing them, that should have bombed compared to this. There was no challenge in a movie like that. As a genre, if we're going to speak about the genre as well, as a genre, people often debate like, oh, this will be a fad like the Western, The
Oh
thing
yeah.
is it'll keep going if these movies have merit, if there's a reason for them to be around. And that's one of the reasons why the Marvel movies are so successful, because every movie, because it's interconnected, they're arguing that it has merit, that it should be around. I think one of the things with DC that they don't understand is that I see a lot of people arguing that they should have done single movies first. I don't actually agree with that. I think they could have done it the way they've done it. The problem is they have no clue what's connected and what's not connected. That why should we care if they don't know what's connected? That's the difference.
Yeah.
Like I've seen a lot of comparisons, and I'll bring this up later, but I've seen a lot of comparisons with Eternals to like Zack Snyder's DC films. Now, I'm an avid fan of those, like certain cuts of those, and I defend them all the time. But there's a reason why this is still being accepted and they weren't, and that's because Warner Brothers and DC don't really know how to sell those. Whereas with this, because it's part of the MCU, it's already telling you that it matters and you should care. And yeah, and I mean, on the topic of what you were saying about the characters flowing well with each other, and you felt like they were really mingling, shall we say? I think that a good first point to bring up is the cast. I thought the cast were across the board pretty fantastic. You can't say too much about them because spoilers. And this is the thing, it deeply surprised me how like this film could be easily spoiled in regards to characters. The trailers I thought were magnificent. They made people go like, I don't know if it looks like, because I was someone that was like, it looks okay, but the trailers sell you on a movie that you don't get. But I don't think it's in a bad way. I think that it made me more surprised watching the film. I didn't expect it to have the level of depth or the level of twists that there were in it. And yeah, I just think across the board, there's a couple of things, and I'll speak later about it, that I think didn't quite hit. But for what the screen time that the cast had, they really inhabited the characters. I really felt them. I've seen in particular criticisms about the lead too, Icarus and Cersei. Like I kind of understand how people would feel it about them, but at the same time, I didn't feel like other people have stated. Like I've seen a lot of people say that they felt they were a bit cold and stuff. I didn't really get that. I just felt like they have a more problem, like a difficult they're in a difficult position. Do you know what I mean? In general, across time, because that's the thing as well, is like being Eternals, they've been around so long, they're gonna be different. Like I would expect if I was around for as long as they were, I would be a bit blank or cold or unsure. And I think that's part of the character you have. And the thing is, they're not all like that. So these two being like that, I didn't think hurt the film.
Yeah, we should note that we had our first Scottish superhero in the MCU, right? Or actor, at least.
And Richard Madden. And I have to say, he was by far my favorite character in the film. I loved him and I loved his performance. And on this topic, I loved, right? And this isn't really a spoiler, but the cast all keep their accents. They don't do like a thing where they Americanize everyone's accents, or they go like, oh, like, some convoluted way of why they all speak the same. They all speak their individual accents. I thought that really helped make them stand out.
Exactly. Like it because this movie could have very easily have been nothing but two-dimensional characters and been like bland and boring. Very easily. Like just on its face of it, the Eternals characters, I think, and this is even playing to my own I guess skepticism going into the comic book of Kirby. Like I had read Fourth World and I've read a little bit of his Thor run, and like those are like these bombastic battles of these like crazy costumes and these awesome looking villains like Darkseid and Loki and stuff. And then you look at like just like the images you'll see of like Kirby Eternals comics, and it's like, okay, like it looks like he's just kind of doing like the same thing is kind of maybe even like phoning it in a little bit. Like they look kind of like not bland, but they look like almost like generic superheroes a little bit. But then when you get into reading it, it's like, no, this is Kirby like even going even maybe even wilder than Fourth World. Like this is him going like even more psychedelic and like going like reaching further, because you think about it, and I know you read the first half of the Fourth World, that was being told across 4 titles, that whole title or the whole run. The Eternals was like him doing the Marvel version of the New Gods a little bit, and people say that. I don't think it's like a direct one-to-one thing. Like it's very different than the New Gods, I will say. But he only had 19 issues plus an annual before that got canceled. I mean, the New Gods, you think about it, it had like they got canceled around issue number 11 for most titles. Mr. Miracle lasted till 18, but that's like 40 issues we're looking at. So he was like, with the Eternals, he's like pumping out the ideas even faster. So like every page is almost like a whole nother huge amount of information just being thrown at you, and it's like exciting. Like it keeps your blood pumping and your synapses firing. So, and I felt like this movie kind of captured that a little bit, because this movie kind of felt like to me it could have been told over 3 movies in like a trilogy, but it's kind of into like 2.5 hours, which is it's a long running time. But I'm glad they let it breathe that much, because any less, and I think it would have hurt the movie. And I'm a guy that's critical of long movies. I'm getting to an older age where like I like a nice 90-minute movie in and out kind of thing, which is much different than my younger days. My younger days I was like, no, give me 4 hours of Batman and I'll go and see it. But this movie felt like it was 2.5 hours, and it warranted it. Like it felt like a trilogy to me, smashed into one movie, and it was just like scene after scene of like new idea or new concept or new layer to these characters and that kind of thing. So I love that about it, and I think that's part of the thing that I feel like tapped into that Kirby charm a little bit, that people that haven't read a huge litany of Kirby stuff won't get. Like I think people that don't read a lot of Kirby will just like look at the visuals and be like, well, it doesn't look like Kirby. Like look at this picture of Kirby's Eternals and look at this movie. They don't look the same. I agree, but like there's still some things in there, that themes and storytelling devices that I think that he used that were present.
So out of curiosity, who was your favorite character, if you could name one, and who was your favorite performance?
Okay, so before I answer that question, I want to say that there's a character in the Kirby run called the Reject, and I don't think he's ever appeared in any other Eternals runs. I've not read the later ones, but from what I've gathered from the people like the show I was on, he doesn't appear in any of them. And I wish he did. And he doesn't appear in this movie either. But the Reject is a deviant, but he's like handsome. So the thing about the deviants is they're all ugly. So he's rejected by the Eternals because he's a deviant, but he's rejected by the deviants because he's handsome. So it's like that interesting layer there. But also, he's just a badass. Like there are scenes in that comic book of Kirby's Eternals where I swear, like there's a whole page spread of like 6 to 9 panels where he's just going through like just fighting dudes and obliterating them, and it feels like a John Wick scene to me, like as close to like a Kirby could get to a John Wick scene where it's just like this guy just mowing through this room of guys, and I was like, how's this character not in anything else? Like he's so cool. So I'll say that I wish the Reject was in the movie, because I feel like you could have did some cool things with him. Not that I feel like he was missing necessarily, just because I personally liked him so much. My favorite character though, I think, was Icarus.
Yeah.
In performance wise, it's hard for me to pick because there were so many that I liked. It was like, like there was so much character to each member of the Eternals that it, like I said, it felt like the MCU when you have like Tony Stark talking to Star-Lord, 2 very well-developed characters over across multiple movies. And when they interact, you're like, this is a big deal. Like they've never met before. We've met them. Yeah. We've seen them in multiple movies by now, but they've never met. And you're anticipating that interaction. The characters in this movie were built so well that like over the course of like the first 10 minutes, I was waiting to see like how Cersei's going to interact with Icarus, or how Droog is going to go ahead, interact with Makari or whatever. It's just like they were so late. I don't know the performance though. I guess it's probably gonna be one of those movies where it changes every time I watch it.
Yeah.
But I think the standouts to me were like, I mean, Icarus was so good. I think he was such a good balance and such a central figure. But like, I loved Angelina Jolie's performance. I thought she did a great job.
Yeah.
And I loved, I don't know the gentleman's name that played Druig. His performance is great.
Barry Keoghan.
Yeah. And he's an Irishman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Makari was great. Like, amazing. To be a deaf actor and to be able to mix in with all these other characters that are speaking verbally, like what an amazing accomplishment that, like, I don't know, it was just the characters blended so well together. It's hard for me to pick a performance. What was yours?
I think no, I would be along the same lines as you. Something I want to mention is, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, because there's so many characters, there's a lot of them. The screen time obviously divides up differently. There's obviously characters that have more screen time than others. And I think off the top of my head, Makari probably has the least screen time. But holy hell, does she have an impact, like, in the small amount of time? Like the fact that you mentioned her there, and she has because even, it's a long movie, a lot happens. And yeah, like maybe character depth is missing on some of the characters, but there's enough moments I'm like, holy hell, I can't wait to see them in another movie or the next appearance or whatever. And Makari is one of them. Makari really impacts in the scenes she's in. And I'll delve more into that in the spoiler part. But yeah, like she's amazing. In regards to me, I've said that I think Icarus was my favorite character because I think that he brought something that the Marvel Universe hasn't had yet. He brought something that I think really enhances the universe, and he brings like a balance to the movie that was really needed. He's key to making that depth hit. He's key to making that sort of, like what I said earlier, like going the next level. Again, why it's my favorite Marvel movie, because it goes another level. Performance wise, I definitely think like Barry Keoghan, I think I'm saying his name right, Barry Keoghan, he stands out as Druid. Like every time he was on screen, I was like, oh crap. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know what's going on. And he did such a good job. Like his presence just commanded the screen whenever he was on it. And I think that, and I want to lead this back to my accent point, having their own accents was genius because it really did help define him. Like I felt like it added something to him in regards to other accents. Like just not having to worry about that. He could just focus on playing the character and add another dimension, but I'm with you. Like, it's really hard to say. I might watch it again and think someone different. I actually think Gemma Chan is really great as Cersei. She's basically the lead of the movie, and she really drives it. I think that she was compelling enough, and especially in the final act, I was definitely there with her. I understand. As I say, I'm aware that some people didn't feel like Icarus and Cersei, but for me, I felt them. I was there. I was in those final moments. I was really with the characters, hoping or just wondering what was going to happen, just like them, to be honest. I think other like Gilgamesh, Don Lee, again, he's probably one of them that has he doesn't get as much as others, but he commands whenever he's on screen.
He was just a total badass. Like he was awesome.
Brian Tyree Henry, Fastos, he was like, he's kind of like again, another one that, like, a lot of these characters, for some reason, when I think back, I'm like, only a few of them get a lot of screen time. But like when they show up, like Fastos, when he shows up, it really surprised me by how seamlessly they fit him in, how it felt natural. And obviously the big moment in the movie that a lot of people are talking about, but his relationship was like really on point. It was really well.
Yeah, I loved
advertised.
The whole scene when he was
advertised, wrong word.
Yeah, his whole scene there when he was like doing the inventions, and like he had that great social commentary of like, he's like, I invented the engine, and they're like, they're not ready for that. These humans, if they do that, it's going to lead to chaos. And it's like, but we can move along their culture so much faster. And there's just like this great commentary of like,
that's maybe a spoiler.
Technology. Oh, is it?
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's just
I was just talking about the social commentary.
This is our first time.
Is it a spoiler?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I agree with that. I agree with you.
Okay. Well, then I'll save the rest of that spiel for the spoiler. I didn't think it was that big of a spoiler. I don't know. Maybe
I don't think it is. But yeah.
Okay. I feel like if people like, I like to go in things completely fresh. That's why I don't watch trailers or anything. So I'm the kind of person that wouldn't even watch this video. Period. I'd wait till after the movie. Then I'd watch.
Why are we doing spoiler free then?
I don't know. But
yeah, I think like Angelina Jolie as well. I agree with you. Like, I actually was really impressed by how I thought she was very understated for a big actress. I have no knowledge of the Eternals before seeing this film. I expected her to have this huge role and command this like the screen, but it reminded me a bit of like Mark Wahlberg in The Fighter. Like, that's a really incredible performance that people don't speak enough about, because his role is to be understated. And I felt that Angelina Jolie and Thena, as aggressive as their character's personality is, it was really awesome seeing this understated performance from a character I never expected to see it from, and an actress I never expected to see it from. And she felt like very much part of the team. I felt like not just as a character, but as an actress, I felt like there was like no ego there. It just felt like she fit in, and just she didn't stand like she did stand out, but not in a way in which I was just like always looking at her. I was looking at them all.
Yeah, like she wasn't like stealing the spotlight. Like she was.
Yeah.
She was in her role the way she should have been, because like I think she was one of the first actors that was like actors casting announcements that were made. Was like,
yeah,
when Eternal, like we knew Eternals was coming out, but the first like casting I think was Angelina Jolie, maybe Salma Hayek. But when you hear those names, it's like, well, first of all, that's weird. Second of all, like I guess everyone wants to be part of the MCU now, so maybe it's not weird.
Yeah.
But then you had like this expectation that they're gonna be like stealing the spotlight, like Halle Berry in the early X-Men movies, who like had these demands about, allegedly, had these demands about how much screen time she had and things like that. Yeah. But like, it didn't seem like that at all for Salma Hayek or Angelina Jolie. They both played their roles and played fair, so to speak. But they, within that though, because they're so talented, they were able to stand out on their own, like with merit, rather than standing out because they demanded to have 2 more lines or whatever it is.
Yeah. What did you think of Chloe Zhao, like the director? Like, what did you think of her direction of the movie?
What's the other big movie she directed?
So she's actually directed 2. Well, they're not. I wouldn't say they're big, but she directed 2 movies. One, I think I've actually not seen either, which always infuriates me. But first one was The Rider, and the second one was Nomadland. Now, she won Oscars for both. But the interesting, if I remember rightly, I think Marvel picked her up before she won her first Oscar. But I'm not sure. It might have been the second movie. But this was like, I just want to say quickly, like them getting Chloe Zhao was a big statement to me. Like, how you're saying, like they're reaching new talent like they wouldn't have reached before. They like, when they announced that, I was like, you just out of the blue wouldn't expect that caliber of director to come and do one of these movies. And that is a big coup for them. Like they managed to hit big with that. Even in regards to if people don't like this movie, like obviously that's fine. If they don't like what she did, that's fine. But people have to see the merit in acquiring a director like that, because that means that this franchise is big enough that big time directors are now looking at it going, maybe I could have my hand in that. I know there's a vocal group that don't really see the point in the genre. That's fine. People have their opinions, and like people like Martin Scorsese. Yeah. I don't think he quite said that, but Godfather of cinema, he can say what he wants. But the fact that we're getting these up and coming Oscar winners and they're coming to the MCU now, that just shows a statement of intent of where we could go in the future,
And directors themselves don't want to direct a movie if they don't have any sort of freedom or creative control or whatnot. And that's kind of been the knock on the MCU for a while, is like, well, it's the MCU, so every movie's going to feel the same and look the same, and you can't really do what you want. Like things like we talked about off air, but we previously had a conversation about Edgar Wright with Ant-Man. It was like, you didn't appreciate how much they were making him tie in the MCU and whatnot. So, but I think that's just a challenge, and there's still freedom within that. If you,
Yeah.
and not to say that Edgar Wright's not talented, maybe it's just something that he doesn't like to work with. Artists are all different, but I think it's a challenge. It's kind of like a big two comic now. Like if you're a writer coming in, you have the challenge of placating to the previous continuity, but then adding your own layer. And there's a freedom in that. It's a challenge, but there's a freedom in that you have that. And if you're talented enough, you can earn that freedom, if you will, or earn that earn the ability to have the audience believe in that, I guess. And one thing that kind of reminds me of a little bit is that the New Gods movie was canceled, and it still kind of breaks my heart a little bit because I had Ava DuVernay was the director who directed a phenomenal show on Netflix, which I forget the name of it now. It was about the 4 kids that were falsely accused of murder in New York in the 80s. What was the name of that movie? I forget.
I'm not
Whatever
sure.
it was. I'm just gonna look it up for me. But it was a phenomenal movie, but there was like this very like gritty, like real story kind of thing. So then when you think that she's gonna be doing New Gods, it's like that's like on this cosmic scale, very fantasy, not real. And then you throw in the fact that Tom King was helping her write the script, and Tom King just came off one of the comic books that Connor and I love with Mr. Miracle. Yeah. Like, so it's Tom King doing his first thing in Hollywood too. Like, I was so stoked for that movie. The fact that I love Kirby, I was a fan of what Ava did with this totally different show. But the fact that she had Tom King kind of holding her hand too, of like, let me introduce you to this world. I was stoked to see like how she was going to direct that movie, but it got canceled.
Yeah, I think it's, maybe we'll be able to delve more into why this is happening. But I find it really interesting that it's the Kirby stuff that seems to not be hitting. And I know that people will have differing opinions on like Justice League and all that, but it does lean into some Kirby aspects in a different way, sure. But like it's still leaning into that, and just like this is, and it doesn't seem to be hitting. And I find that really interesting because obviously because of Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League, they canceled that New Gods movie. But I would want them to lean more into that. I would want them to do more of that. That's something that, as a comic book fan, and like having just recently read the first part of it, that's something that I would be interested in seeing more in. It's one of the pieces of lore that I think makes it more original. And seeing that the Eternals is now taking kind of that Kirbiness, as you say, and Marvel have done it, and that's not hit. I'm like, okay, so what's missing? As I say, that's probably easier to discuss in the spoiler bit, but it's just an interesting.
It
thought.
is.
I think it's.
As a little side note, I do kind of want to hear your thoughts on the Kirby Eternals run because I was surprised in the group of the cupcakes because this whole channel was derived upon us having a group chat with like dozens of people, and I was just the amount of people that don't read Kirby stuff in the chat. I was kind of surprised that anybody in the chat loved the Fourth World. So when you told me that, I was like, this guy's my people. I can talk to him. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the Eternals then, seeing that you love that one so much, and see like what your thoughts are, because I feel like it's a kind of a hard thing to ask any modern comic book fan to be like, go read this thing from the 70s. It's amazing and it's weird and you're not going to understand everything the first time you read it. It's really out there, but it's so enjoyable and fun. Like it's a hard ask, but I feel like since you've already kind of bridged that gap of enjoying the Fourth World, I feel like it's an easier ask to get you to read it.
Yeah, I plan on reading it in the next few weeks, to be honest. I like this movie got me so excited. Like I've bought the entire Kieran Gillen run that's going right now, like up till this point, and I'm gonna plan on reading that as well. So it might be another video if we want to discuss that.
I do want to read that run. So
yeah, because I mean, the Eternals, like on the topic of like Kirbiness, and like a lot of people don't read it. I think people misinterpret comics nowadays. I think again we've had this discussion recently where we're saying like things like Watchmen and V for Vendetta. If someone says I'm new to I want to get into comics, they get recommended those, but they're like the last thing you should be recommended. Like I think like things like Fourth World and even maybe Eternals, like I've not read it, but it could be the same. I think you need to be experienced in comic books. And I don't mean that to sound like a hurdle, but like I've read a lot of modern day comics for quite a few years now. And in the past couple of years, I've started going backwards. And I think if the more experienced you are in comics, the more you'll appreciate the what came before.
Yeah.
And see the layers of it. Yeah, I know people have read it, don't like it. That's fair. I think really though there should be an appreciation for the foundation of what that, like, I mean, DC still built upon the fourth world. Dark side. I mean, we're getting movies now that have dark side. Like that's the foundation there. We got to appreciate that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I would say though, since we've had this within the last year or so of representation of some of those new gods characters, particularly the cast from like the Apocalypse with like Darkseid and Granny Goodness and whatnot. And I'll say this with the caveat that I still need to watch the Snyder Cut. So I'm saying this purely based off my opinion of the visuals that I've seen.
Yeah.
But one of my issues with Snyder is that it's a trope now, but it's like the muted colors. Like I like things to be super colorful, especially with comics. I don't, even in modern comics, I have this criticism of that. Like it seems to be, we're going down this trend of having like these muddied colors. They're like just not interesting to me. Like I like the bombastic primary colors, a little bit of secondary colors added in of like the Marvel Silver Age and like DC Silver Age and even like Kirby comics in the 70s. Like that stuff interests me. And I think the Eternals, the MCU in general has done a better job of color, in my opinion. Like before we had this issue where all the X-Men had to wear black leather outfits and stuff, because nobody would take that seriously on the big screen, which is idiotic to me. You're seeing a superhero movie, like get over it. But the MCU finally got over that hurdle with, and they still do it a little bit. There's still sometimes that these characters are like really, their outfits are like really broken down to just these leather outfits, and it's like that's not the interesting character that I love. But for the most part, they finally got over that. With like the worst costume is a big one to me. That from the get go they didn't. It wasn't a 1-to-1 adaptation, but they finally got over the hurdle of like this guy's gonna look ridiculous in this outfit on screen, and you put it on Chris Hemsworth and everything's gonna look good, right? But so I think the Eternals, though, I think they did such a good job of adding color. Like there's so much bright, vibrant color to this movie. And again, that's one more Kirby aesthetic. And he didn't do his own colors, but I feel like he probably had a hand in it because all his comics were of the same palette, if you will. So like, yes, the colors weren't exactly 1-to-1 what Kirby did. He was like Icarus's outfit, for instance, was very much like Superman, like red, blue, yellow. In the comics, and I think there's a reason for that, and I think in the movie they kind of delve into that a little bit. Maybe that's a spoiler, I don't know, but his outfit wasn't a 1-to-1 adaptation, but it still had those aspects to it, like I wish they would have gone a little bit more into that, maybe a little bit more red into his costume, but I was satisfied with that, and I was satisfied that there was like these scenes with like the sun. Like there's scenes with like bright palettes behind them in the backgrounds. Like that stuff's interesting to me. Those are interesting, vibrant visuals to me. So I really appreciate that. And that's probably a sign of the director. Like you said, you're asking me about how I felt about the direction. I feel like maybe more of the director of photography, but I feel like she probably had a hand in that as well. And just like, as far as her performance as a director as well, I think when I praise the interactions and the chemistry of the actors, I think she had a hand in that as well. But the aesthetics were nice to me.
I think it's a good point to bring up. Like Ben Davis was the cinematographer on this movie.
Okay.
He's done a lot of Marvel movies before. Most recently, he did Captain Marvel. I thought he really complimented the movie. I thought that the tone of the movie was pretty spot on. I agree with you in what you're saying though about the sun and stuff. Like there was a lot of wide shots in this movie I really appreciate. The thing I appreciated most about this movie, and by God, I know it's expensive and it's going to be hard right now because of COVID. It's probably the worst time for me to ask this, but real sets, like they were on real, they flew to the actual locations to film this stuff. Like it didn't look like anything was floating. It was always grounded and it was amazing. And like certain shots, like there's particular ones that I can think of with Cersei and Icarus when they're standing on this sort of like mountaintop sort of place, and that's real. And I felt because that was real, I got into the scene more because I didn't have to try and focus on the aesthetic. It was all perfectly built for me. I just had to focus on the performance, and that is like something that's sorely missing in cinema now, particularly in this genre. I know it's easier, but it's so much better when it's filmed on location, you know.
Yeah, and
um
like that's something that I think in art in general, I always make the argument that no matter what technology comes out, people will always appreciate the traditional, more realistic form. So, like for instance, like auto tune in music, auto tune became a phenomenon, and people were like, "That's ruining music." Now anybody can be a singer. It's like no, there's going to be people still. The cream rises to the top. There's still going to be people like that truly do sing and have a great voice that people will recognize. And the same thing with film, like when like Sin City and 300 came out, and it was all filmed completely on sound stages with like green screen. People were like, it was amazing. It looked great, but people were like, well, that's the future. We don't need locations anymore. Look at this. Everything's green screen. It's like, yes, that's great for certain movies.
yeah.
But then you have like people like Christopher Nolan come out and it's like, no, I don't want CGI. I want to try to do as many practical effects as I can. I'm gonna try to make it as practical as I can until I can't, and then I'll throw in some CGI if I have to, because people appreciate that more. And just like what you're saying with sets, like this movie could have been filmed on a soundstage with green screen, but it would have been
Yeah.
soulless, and it would have not felt as intentional and as what you're saying, like as real. Like you would not have been invested because you could tell. And any moment like that to where the movie is showing you a bit of phoniness is what's going to pull you out of the movie, because we're talking about super gods, right? these things aren't real anyway. So it's like you need as much to pull the viewer in to the world to make them feel like this is real, that they can immerse themselves into the movie, or else they're gonna be out and the movie's gonna be a failure.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. When we're talking about like Chloe Zhao and stuff, I've seen some people debate whether she was allowed her actual vision in the movie or if like there was Marvel tampered with it. I think on the most part, I would disagree with that point. I think it was a very it felt so different to other Marvel movies that I felt like that she hadn't really been told to steer away, because it just felt like someone's unique voice. But I do think the one aspect of it, and I'll go further in the spoiler part, is the deviants. I felt like maybe there was a bit of tampering with the deviants. I think the deviants, I like them mostly. I think deviants, without spoiling, I think deviants kind of lost me about into the third act, but I liked them mostly. I thought they were menacing. I thought they were foreboding, and I genuinely felt scared for the characters around them. I just think plot wise, they definitely lost me 3/4 of the way through the film. But other than that, like that point, I feel like Chloe Zhao had control of the movie. I felt like it very much felt, I can't say it felt like her voice because I've not seen her other movies yet, but it definitely felt unique compared to the other films.
Yeah, for real. So I think this is a good place to end the non-spoiler part. I think we've talked about our thoughts. I think now we should dive into the spoilers. So if you haven't seen Eternals, this is your last warning. Stop the video now, go see the movie, and then come back and hit play, because you want to make sure you finish strong and hear these two cupcakes views on the movie with spoilers. So this is the last warning. I'm going to ask Dan to do a screen thing that says spoilers. All right, we're good. So I don't know how you want to. I guess one thing I want to ask you with spoilers, dive into the deviants thing you were talking about there a little bit.
So the deviants, right? So if we're talking about, I feel like the deviants progress. There's the plot in regards to the deviants progressed really well. I got their meaning. I got why they were around. I got why they were there. And I felt like this natural build-up. And I felt like the movie had so much things to say. I was going in the third act. I was like, I'm really impressed that so much is going on and it all feels like it fits. And Crow as the main bad guy, well, yeah, kind of the main bad guy, he developed really well. And when he became humanoid, I was like, whoa, like that was a bit freaky. And it was really cool. But then after he becomes humanoid, I genuinely felt like it was like a full stop. I feel like he had nowhere to go and he filled the gap in the end point, but didn't really have anything to say. And I feel like that's maybe where, if there was anything where Chloe Zhao has been told to change something, because that third act, again, there's so much going on, but it all has a point. And that was the challenging part of the film. Like, you're sitting there, you've been told all these things. Basically, the movie's like a pitch. The movie's a pitch on how to feel about the third act. And you've got to sit there the whole movie and you enjoy these warm moments and you enjoy these, when they're all like bantering with each other, or these action scenes are awesome, albeit there is some like, sad bits, but throughout the movie, you're distracted. You're going, oh, like, but that thing at the end, but oh, this is really fun and this is funny. Oh, but that thing at the end, how do I feel about it? And you come to the end and you're in this moment where there's so much going on and you're listening to all these opinions and all these different ideas, and you're like, okay, and you're trying to figure out, and then Crow comes along and he just kind of drifts ashore, and then he stands up and then all of a sudden he's a part of it. And I thought, okay, so because when he's first revealed, the way his dialogue goes, I thought, okay, so he's on the side of Eternals. But then he was fighting the Eternals. And I was like, I don't actually know what you're trying to go for here. And then he kind of just goes, and I was like, okay, so he had no point. He was there to kind of get Icarus from A to B, basically. And yeah, it was at that point I was like, okay, I feel like there was a bigger point for Crow and the Deviants. And that felt like maybe it was like, oh, the runtime's too long, or this is getting a bit big, we need to pull it back a wee bit. That's the only point, but that's kind of how I felt. The thing I would say quickly though on the third act in regards to the Deviants, I was having this conversation the other day. If we take movies, for example, like, even, I say Spider-Man 3, I'd also maybe use, because it's recent, Venom 2 as an example. Venom 2 is a CGI sort of fest ending, which, yeah, Eternals still has, but you're going to Spider-Man 3 and that has a lot going on, but it's kind of brainless. Like, okay, it's nostalgia now, I kind of appreciate that movie, but if you analyze the movie, that last part is brainless. There's no choreography, there's no depth to it. It's just fighting, it's just things on screen, and it's just things happening, and there's too much, and it's just, but with this movie, it felt like in the third act, even Crow being a bit, I don't want to, maybe brainless, it still felt like it had a point. Like, it still felt like if that was a bad interpretation of it, this is the best bad interpretation you're going to get in regards to like Crow in this part. And all the pieces were fitting so well that it didn't really hurt that Crow was like that. I just noticed it, but it didn't like detract from the movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think my criticism too of the most unkirby part of the movie, just because I keep harping on that, even though I just want to make it well known that I never expect a movie to be a one-to-one adaptation of the comic book, because then what's the point? I want to see someone else's vision of the source material, so I'm not expecting that. But the one criticism, and I hope that comes through with all my praises of it, because it's not a one-to-one adaptation of anything that Kirby did. One thing though is that he had a lot more layers to the Deviants characters that I appreciated. Like, you almost feel like sympathetic for him in a way that you don't, or at least I didn't in the movies, as far as like what their intentions are and what they've dealt with, kind of thing. So like, you have this weird like back and forth in the comic books of like whose side you're on. Like, Icarus is obviously like the main hero from the get-go of Eternals, the comic book, because like he's like front and center. He's the first Eternal you meet in the comic book. He's on the corner box of the cover, like obviously showing you like this is the hero that you need to pay attention to. But it's not like a traditional superhero comic book in the way that he's not always coming off as like the guy, like you kind of waffle a little bit on who you're really not rooting for, but necessarily like you're able to see the sympathies of the other characters, if that makes sense. So I didn't really get that, I guess, from the Deviants. They did feel kind of like what you're saying. I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but like they kind of moved the plot along a little bit. Yeah, I didn't mind it so much as though, because I did appreciate the climax and the conclusion we got. Like, I felt like that was so good that my worries about the Deviants in Act 2, if you will, or kind of subsided because I really do appreciate the way the movie was in climax, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the choreography and the storytelling told in that last battle was like every movement and every movement was intentional. Like every strike and every blow and every superpower we saw was like intentional and helped develop the characters and put them over even more. Like Makari,
Yeah.
like going like ham on Icarus, which is
Oh God, that was so awesome.
yeah. And then I keep getting his name wrong. The guy that invents stuff. I'm so bad with names.
Oh, Fastos.
Yeah,
That came out of nowhere. I was
yeah,
like,
when he
whoa.
like tied down Icarus, I was like, yes, like oh man.
It
But
felt like characters weren't being held back. It felt like they were in a they were like in a life or death situation.
yeah, and they each had a
You know?
time to shine in that big moment. Like that was the biggest moment of the movie. Each one had time to shine. Each one had an opportunity to show off their powers and whatnot. It was just amazing, and everything felt intentional. Like it felt like, yes, we understand why Makari is trying to beat the hell out of Icarus in this moment.
Yeah.
Like it makes sense to me. It's not just because we're at the climax of the movie. That's the guy they're going after. Let's beat him up. You know, like it felt like it was building to that moment, and it made sense.
Yeah. I just want to bring up as well, while we're talking about like the action and stuff, right? I've seen a lot of comments as well about how the movie's more of a talky movie than an action movie. See, when the action kicks in, this thing blew my mind. Like the jungle fight, I was losing it over that. You know, like when Icarus is like in the jaws of that deviant, that not only did that feel insane, but that like looked insane. I felt like, and with the way, because obviously we haven't really said it, but not every character makes out alive, and that was one of the biggest twists for the movie. Me in general was just the characters were not safe. I was genuinely scared for characters, particularly in the third. Like that made the third act so much more scary because I genuinely at points thought Fastos was going to die. Like I thought, this is it. He's done. Icarus is going to break out or whatever. But no, like the jungle fight with Gilgamesh and the Deviant and Kingo and the Deviant and Icarus and the Deviant. That's what I mean. I felt like the Deviants were dangerous. It's just the third act that lets me down on that. But like when Icarus is holding the jaws of that Deviant open and it's pushing him back, I was like, whoa. You know, or even like Druig when he's controlling the village and they're pointing guns at him, at the Deviant. I was like, whoa, like this is so menacing. Like, yeah, kill that thing, but you're also like, but he's controlling this entire village and they have no say in what they're doing right now. If they die because this Deviant, it's his fault. You know, like there's just so much going on.
Yeah, and I think one thing I love about it too is like, again, we're seeing like super gods battle, and like the whole thing is like Eternals, like they can't die. That's like their whole like shtick or whatever. So you think that with that, like knowing that the stakes, you can't have high stakes, right?
Yeah.
But this movie did such a good job of building those stakes regardless. That you were so invested regardless, especially when the super gods are fighting each other towards the end. Like you're fully invested.
Yeah. And the thing is like with like this is what I mean by the trailer being so on point. The trailer like angles it like, okay, it's these guys, there's bad guys, they come together, they fight the bad guy. That's not it at all. And the thing is like Ajax, her death at the start, I was gobsmacked. Like, hold on a second, this is Salma Hayek. She's in all the adverts, she's been talking in all the interviews, she was at Comic-Con leading them all out. And she, you know, she's front and center in the trailers in this costume. And inside like 20 minutes of a 2-hour, 37-minute film, she's gone. And you're like, what? And that instantly sets the tone because you're scared then. Because you're like, if she can go, and then obviously the follow-up of Gilgamesh is like, whoa, like this movie's not afraid. And then, as we say, that means that the third act, when Makari is going ham, when she's just losing it on Icarus, it's because if she stops for a second, Icarus is strong enough that, yeah, it could just go like that, you know? And again, when Fastos was taking Icarus on, I genuinely thought Fastos was going to die. I was sitting there like, oh God, no, please. Just, when he was locking him down with his abilities, I was like, lock him down more. You know?
Oh yeah. Because like, yeah, I had the same feeling because his head was still up and I was like, no, you got to put something on, like head down to the ground. No, but like, and then with Ajax though, like you were still invested in that character when it happened. So it's still like they did such a good job in the short screen time that she had to build that up. And then even the fact that they talk about it afterwards so much, like they carried weight to it. And then Gilgamesh was another character that like was just built up as this like badass. That like you
Yeah,
can't imagine him losing a fight ever. So
yeah.
like that carried a lot of weight to it too.
And his passing, they might like I felt that. And I know that people around me felt that in the cinema when I saw because it was quite busy. But like they managed to do that in the space of like an hour and 20 with him. And his relationship with Thena, and this is where I was coming from earlier with Angelina Jolie's performance in it. Like I thought it was really odd that of all the characters in this movie that got paired together, it was Gilgamesh and Thena. But their performances were so good, and Angelina Jolie was so understated, and it just allowed him to just kind of get a little leg up in regards to their relation, and it just was magnificent. Like I just was totally
Yeah.
taken aback by it, you know.
No, for real.
Um,
Like it was fantastic. I mean, I don't know. I think because we got a little bit long, so I don't want to wrap up
yeah,
this
yeah,
part, but um, I think we could talk about now the post credit scenes, and then how we feel like this is going to bleed into the future of the MCU. Because one thing before we get into that, I want to say is like the celestial scene, like near the end there with Circe, was incredible. And the fact that we've seen like the world-ending stakes in the MCU, but still they managed to have that be like this huge momentous thing
yeah.
in this movie that was a brand new concept that was introduced. I mean, I guess they talked about celestials before in the MCU, but like for the
See,
most part, the brand new concept introduced, but it still carried that weight to it. And it was still like
yeah.
it's like this
Well, the
giant
thing is,
freaking robot coming out of the water.
yeah. Well, the thing is like another comment I've seen people say about the movie is it ends abruptly, and it does end abruptly. But I think in its favor, like that got me more excited for a number two. The thing is like, yeah, the whole movie when you're watching it, you're thinking so much about like 30 minutes, about an hour before the end, I was like, I'm scared. Anyone could die in this. I don't want my favorites to die. And they're all my favorites. I didn't want any of them to die. And then 30 minutes from the end, I was like sitting there, like, I genuinely don't know how this is going to end. Now, with every other Marvel movie, I've had a rough idea, you know? But
Yeah.
with this movie, I had no clue how it was going to end. And it had me. And then in that moment, like when the ending kind of happens in the kind of epilogue, let's just say the last 15 minutes sort of epilogue of the movie, I was sitting there like, okay, all that happened, and I don't know how to feel. I'm gonna need to sit with that. But all this time, Arisham, what's going on with him? Surely he wouldn't be happy about that. And the minute you question that, he shows up in this
Yep.
awesome scene that just explodes and just like see it on the biggest screen. It would just be so ominous, you know?
And I had so when the MCU was happening, and like I said, I had the podcast and stuff. Like I was critical of what they would do in the next phase because Thanos, those stakes were like as high as you can get in my imagination at that point. It's like they need to go back to the ground at this point. Like they need to go back and go back to the get grounded again and build back up. Like I don't want to see Galactus teased to where in 4 movies it's gonna be Galactus, it's the big bad. Like that's too much. Like you can't like raise the stakes this high and then go just a little bit higher with Galactus and then keep raising.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't work that way. Like you need to go back down, build Galactus up over like 10 or 12 movies or whoever the big bad's gonna be, and then we can get back there again and feel that way that we felt about Thanos. But this movie, like the stakes were like they felt bigger than Thanos in a way that like not emotionally in my emotional investment in it. Like I can't say that like my emotional investment in Thanos was like all time, but
Yeah.
it just still felt bigger than Thanos to where like
Yeah.
I can see the next stage going. And again, I still think they should take it slow. I don't think they should go too fast on it, but it didn't feel impossible to me that the stakes could be higher than Thanos. And that's what kind of that's something I didn't see happening. I thought like Thanos is as big as it's gonna get. How could they ever get any bigger than that? But this movie kind of made me feel like, yeah, they could do that. They can do that. They can raise the stakes
Yeah.
higher.
I think one of the things that helps with that though is that with Infinity War and Endgame, although Thanos was the all-ending bad guy, we as viewers were focused on the point of view of Earth. You know, like the most of the time, like okay, we'll see like the Nova Corps and like Guardians will go to other planets, but they're only like cameos of sorts. Like in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things, we were mostly focused on the Earth aspect of this story. The Eternals are obviously not really from Earth, and although throughout the movie they are on Earth, they don't feel earthly. They feel otherworldly. So And the way that they build up the Celestials, when Arishem shows up at the end, I think that's one of the big deals why it's scary, because we have never truly, really explored space. Like, okay, we explored a couple planets in Guardians, and we explored like really Ego in Guardians 2. But space-wise, we have not been to the depths of space. So when he disappears with them in the end, we have no clue where he's going. We have no clue where they're going to be taken to. And it's like now the possibilities are endless of what the next part's going to be. Where do they go? What's happening? How is he going to interrogate them? Do you know what I mean?
No, that's true. And like and then we still have like the aspects of like Captain Marvel where the big question was like, why wasn't she there for all these other cataclysmic events that happened? And her answer is like, well, Earth's not the only planet that needs saving. So we even have like that kind of like plot thread hanging out there too, is like Captain Marvel exploring other that might completely unrelated to Eternals, possibly, probably. But like, so yeah, you're right. Like the vastness of space.
That, I mean, that's a good point as well. Like even with Captain Marvel, we only really see 2 extra planets. You know, like the way that Arishem is throughout the movie, he's this huge thing that is almost like the sun. It's unimaginable how big he is. And because like I really loved it in the first few scenes of him, you were just right up close to like his nose.
Yeah.
And you couldn't actually see either side of him because it gives you this sense of scale.
Yeah.
So when you eventually see him only half body, this guy's massive. And again, it increases the scale, but because you're used to seeing him so close, it means that when you're introduced to he feels even bigger. So
yeah,
someone this big has to inhabit a part of the universe that wouldn't be in something we would see him if we had visited an area he was in already. So again, it adds to this, where is he? Like when he appears to Earth for the first time in like big, large scale, that's scary. Like you can imagine, like I can imagine Hawkeye being like, oh yeah, Christmas time, let's like, what the hell? You know, like this is game changing. This has to be game changing, you know? So
he's like, that's above my pay grade. I think we
this is like Earth would take notice of that, you know? So it's like, again, it's the mind. It plays on your mind and the unknown. And that's what I loved about that ending. And it cutting abrupt made it even better as well, because I thought, oh, we're going to get a glimpse to where they go. But they literally just get picked up. And again, it seems like such a small thing, but they don't show you when they are picked up by Arishem at the end, you don't get a close-up of a single one of them. You just see them from a distance as tiny little things. Because you know who's on Earth, you know who's been picked up. That, again, adds to the scale. You don't get to be worried with them because you don't even get to be close to them because this thing's too big and too strong. So when he gets taken away, you feel like you've not had a say in them getting taken away. You know, you've not had a chance to go, no, don't take them. They're just gone. Right. They're just gone and gone. So that means that you don't get a say. You don't know where they are. And right now, it's like when you watch these shows and it's a hostage situation, but you have no idea where the person is that's kidnapped them. You have no idea where the people you care about have been taken. You know, the setup is that you're going to have to go find them. But as we know in real life, that could be really impossible. So it translates to us as viewers, and that we're like, wow, we're going to have to be going this really stressful journey to find these guys that no one's ever been before, clearly, you know? And that's what I love about the ending.
Absolutely. And we did get the Eternals will return message that we've gotten on previous MCU movies that warranted sequels. Yeah. I don't know that we've ever had an occurrence where they had that and they didn't get another solo movie. Like that's not like what I'm saying is like that doesn't apply. Like we'll see that character in another movie of someone else's kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it seems to be like they're invested in a second Eternals movie, which I mean doesn't mean they have to do that. Like if it's movie, I don't know, I haven't looked at the early numbers, but if this movie completely bombs at the box office, you know, even in the midst of a pandemic, it doesn't.
I genuinely think it'll be one of the biggest crimes ever if this doesn't get another movie.
Right, like I'd be really upset if they just kind of pigeonholed the next chapter of their story in like a Thor movie or something.
You know, it's something I do not want them to do because this is too good an ending, and I think honestly, Chloe Zhao, I have a feeling she's already tapped to do Eternals too. This again, too big an actress. They had the foresight to get her before she became big. So if they have the foresight to do that, they have the foresight to go, we want you to do a 2 and 3. And
wait, you're saying that you think she will be back for 2 and 3?
I think she will be back.
Oh, okay.
At least a 2. At least the two. I think, like, again, they've shown too much foresight for that not to happen. And the other thing as well is, like, you brought it up. There's so have other people about this could have easily been 2 movies. And now watching it, I was sitting there like, the jungle scene could easily be the end of movie 1, and then the rest of it you could easily spread out to be a movie 2 and dig deeper. And that's cool and interesting, right? But I think the reason there's so much in this first movie is because she's doing a number 2. Like, she's got a plan of how these are laid out. Also, she's seemingly in the final talks to be tapped up for Kevin Feige's Star Wars movie. So Kevin Feige has a good relationship with her, clearly. That, again, although she might go off to do Star Wars, that also gives me an inclination that she's tight with them and that they she's happy enough to continue.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
And on top of that, she had a big hand in the after credit scene. She was the one that hired Harry Styles. So she's thinking, why would you give her that say if she's going to end here? Because she, like, really, it's only one scene, Yeah,
and that was the first after credit scene was Harry Styles showing up as Eros, with Pip, I might add.
That Pip was the worst CGI in the movie.
It wasn't good.
It wasn't good.
Like, the characterization was good. Like I don't know who the actor was that was playing him, but like the characterization was good. Like it felt like it was right out of a Jim Starlin comic.
I'm not sure, but I think it was Patton Oswalt.
Oh, okay. I could see
that. I think it was. That's who it sounded like.
He did. I agree the CGI was a little rough, so hopefully they fix that before he shows up again. But it was kind of cool to see like that Starlin. So we just watched this big Kirby movie, and then we're seeing like we're seeing Jim Starlin's cosmic stuff. Blend in which Kirby was. I mean, Starlin was obviously so influenced by Kirby's cosmic stuff. It was cool to see that kind of tied in together.
Yeah. The thing is like with that ending as well, like as bad as the CGI was in that scene, and I've seen criticisms, I'd much rather it was in that scene than in the movie.
Yes.
Because I don't actually think there was a point in the movie where I was ever taken out by like the CGI.
Right. And then even now they have the opportunity to fix it before Pip shows up in a longer form.
Because like even when I compare it to like a great superhero movie like Wonder Woman, I love Wonder Woman. I think it's fantastic. There's some ropey CGI in that always pulls me out.
Yeah, and I mean, if you go back to it too, like the first time we saw Thanos in a post-credit scene, he didn't look stellar. Like he didn't look as good as he does in Endgame.
He was in it. I was like, that was like prosthetics though. That was like real. I'm pretty sure they made all that and stuff. But obviously the CGI had the size and
I think it was more of his costume was kind of bugging me, which maybe not CGI, but I feel like they got the costume right eventually. I think that first appearance was kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
But and then the second after credit scene was if you know comics, you knew that this was coming anyways, because he said his name Dane Whitman earlier in the movie, right?
Yeah. Like
the first and last name we got both in the movie.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if it was just Cupcake Owen spoiling that for me with the poster he shared. That's just a little tease. I don't care. Owen, I love you if you're watching. But then we see him with the ebony sword.
Did you see the reference to it earlier?
Maybe
Thena picks up a sword and somebody says, "Is that the ebony blade?" And they're like, "No, it's Excalibur."
Oh man, how did I miss that?
I was like, "Whoa, damn!" I think I caught that right.
I will say though, now with obviously we're getting the Black Knight. It's what the character that Dane Whitman turns into, and Circe, who both eventually join the Avengers in one of the later runs. And they just released that omnibus recently. I think it was Avengers of the Gathering. I think it was that one.
Yeah.
It makes me, and I could totally pass on it because I was like, I don't have any interest in that, whatever. Like now I kind of want to go back and read that run because I was like, I kind of invested in these characters now. I kind of want to see them mingle and mix it up with the Avengers.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, with that second after credit scene, in the scene, Dane Whitman picks up the ebony blade. Does he actually pick it up? I think he picks it up. But then there's a voice. Do you know who that voice is? Because I had an inkling, but it was confirmed. Like Chloe Zhao's actually said who it was.
So I thought at first, my only thought about it was, and then I didn't even think about it like the first second. It's like, oh, I thought it was Sam Jackson, but then the thought came out. Then I was like, no, probably not. And then I didn't even think about it again.
Do you want me to reveal in our
Yeah,
video
go
who
ahead.
it was for you? It's Blade.
Oh,
It's Marshall Ali.
wow.
Yeah, I got that when I heard I was like, whoa, I think that's, and then Chloe Zhao confirmed it was Blade. It was actually originally supposed to be
What?
Sam Captain America,
Okay.
but they changed it to Blade, which gives me a lot of thoughts about the future in that
I
regard.
know. Is there a? I'm not. I haven't. I have to say, I don't know. I've read very many comics at all with Dane Whitman in them, and I have read very few Blade comics. I think too. Is there a connection there in the comics?
No, I don't think there is.
Okay.
My only thought is that I've seen rumblings that Moon Knight's going to introduce some, obviously, like with the classic Werewolf by Night and stuff. They're going
Yeah.
to introduce maybe like some vampires and stuff. And I was like, imagine Black Knight and Blade kicking ass and some vampires.
See, that's what I'm talking about with the weirdness. Like, we're not talking
Yeah,
about when I say out there and stuff. I'm not just talking about just cosmic. We're getting into
yeah,
monsters and stuff. We're getting
yeah.
into, like what's one of the other projects that's coming out that's really out there? Uh,
Um,
I can't even think about it now. Well, the Fantastic Four and the X-Men are going to be eventually
yeah.
joined in, but like, oh, sorry, that's what it is. The Doctor Strange, the
Multiverse of Madness.
Multiverse of Madness. That's going to be like really weird movie, and it's going to show all kinds of weird stuff. There's rumors that Blade's going to be introduced in that movie, or at least appear in it. And then there's like, and then Scarlet Witch is going to be maybe a part of it. So it's like we're getting into weird stuff now, and I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, same. I just want them. I Even if Eternals isn't successful, I don't want them to step away from that. I want them to understand that if it wasn't successful, even as much as I loved it, learn from the mistakes, but don't stop experimenting. Keep going and try and find a further depth to these movies, you know?
I think one thing that would help them though is if they do, like, if Moon Knight does introduce further like the Black Knight stuff, and
Mm-hmm,
he's like a hit character in that show, or if he's a hit
mm-hmm,
character in Blade, and like those things that tie together. If Cersei shows up in the Avengers, and she becomes like a hit character, mixing in with them, those are going to be the kind of things that build on people wanting to see him. Because like I think about back to like the first Thor movie wasn't a massive hit compared to like Iron Man and even Captain America, which I don't think did super well at the box office comparatively. It was
yeah.
still successful, but they still stayed the course with Thor. And then by the time the Avengers happens, everyone was on board for Thor. They're like, no, 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 like we do like this character, and that I think played into more Thor movies. Maybe my timeline's messed up there, but I feel like
Mm-hmm.
those further appearances of some characters kind of builds a reaction from the fans that they want to see more of them. If that makes sense.
I think, see, what's interesting, if you bring up Thor Dark World, I think Thor Dark World is a much better movie when you look at it from Loki's point of view.
Maybe I'll
I
watch
know
it.
that
Maybe I'll watch
I
it
know
again from
that
that point of view.
I know that Thor is like the lead character and the movie itself is mostly Thor. But if you look at the movie from Loki's point of view, like those scenes are killer. They really enhance.
Oh no, Loki for sure is the only part of that movie that I enjoy. He killed
Mhm.
it, and there was
Well,
rumors.
that's where all the character development is. All the
Right,
character development is Loki in that movie.
there was rumors before the movie came out that Loki wasn't even going to be a part of it. That
Yeah.
like early on they had no interest of, or not no interest, but they had no intentions of putting Loki in the character or in the movie. And I was like, the movie would have been so much worse if Loki wasn't in it. He's the
Yeah.
only thing that saved it.
I just remembered quickly. I want to bring up quickly, right? I was going to say something earlier, and I think I got sidetracked as we always do. They one thing I don't want them to do with that Irishman ending is do a classic Marvel. Now I love these movies, but the thing that pees me off most with them is their anticlimactic and follow-ups to their endings. I really hate, like, for instance, like Aunt May finds out Peter's Spider-Man.
Oh yeah,
It's nothing. Thor is leading Asgard in space now. It's nothing.
yeah.
Wakanda is now entering into like a really into a bigger world in regards to global, politics. We're just not even gonna, like everything kind of just feels like it's big, and then the next movie it's like, nah, it's not that big, you know. Like at least with No Way Home, that looks like obviously it's a big deal with the ending of him, the world finding out who he is and stuff. I just don't want them. I want a whole movie dedicated to what, or like I want there to be an adequate amount of movie dedicated to resolving this plot point. I don't want it done in like 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean?
I'm afraid for the moment I saw that, which was great because it was like J. Jonah Jameson doing like a Alex Jones bit where he's like,
Yeah.
it seemed like he might as well had like tinfoil hat on, and he was like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That's my fear, is that they're just gonna blow it away like early on, say like, no, he's just this wise crack, like nobody listens to that guy anymore, like they do like Alex Jones.
Yeah.
That's my fear, is that they're just gonna brush it off like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I agree with you though. I'd like to see a whole movie dedicated to that. I just don't know how you put that toothpaste back in the tube afterwards. Like when the world
Yeah.
finds out that who Peter Parker is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think in regards to Eternals as well, toothpaste back in the tube. We have to see how the world reacts to this. That's too big an event for like. If we go all the way through Hawkeye, and it's not mentioned, they're gonna have to say it took place before Eternals. Like, Eternals seems like a point now where Loki, fair enough, and WandaVision you could say is before and stuff, but we're gonna get to a point in projects where we're gonna have to say that it happened at this point. And surely we'll see how people react.
For the most part, the MCU has been pretty good about setting timelines like that. So like if they feel like that they don't want Hawkeye to mention that because that's gonna like shake things up too much in that world, then I would hope they would put like the year or timeline in there. And they've been good about releasing the timeline and updating it too, as far as like chronologically. So I don't have so much fear of that, like, because that's a fear of mine in comics and movies in general, especially when they have interconnected universes. Like, that's why I hate Iron Man 3 so much. Like Iron Man 3, I always say this, as a standalone movie, if you just pull it out of the MCU, it's good. But the fact that like this guy, just after Avengers, so after all these guys got together and they're decided we're gonna be heroes together, he gets his house blown off a cliff and nobody comes and helps him. Like that, I can't get over that in my brain. It's like, wait, he just joined this team of superheroes. This guy blows his house off a cliff and Thor's not flying in. Captain America's not giving him a phone call asking him if he's okay. Like I can't wrap my head around that. So I like when they do acknowledge things like that. They haven't been perfect, obviously, because I just gave an example, but they've been pretty good about it. But I feel like
final.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, you go.
Well, I was gonna wrap it up. So.
Oh, okay. No, the last thing, just quickly, I want to mention, because we didn't bring him up, the score for the movie done by Rami Djawadi. I hope I said that right. I thought was excellent. He's done Westworld and Game of Thrones, and there was definitely elements of that in this movie. I thought the main theme is really awesome. And I thought the opening was kind of haunting in an introduction. Like it had this really almost alien feel to it, I thought. Like, I mean, like alien. Yeah. And like just the quietness and the simplicity of what was on screen. And then it was like an organ or something. Just this slow melody in the background made it very space-like and felt very alien. And then moving into like the main theme and stuff, I thought, you did an excellent job.
I think this sound in general has like evolved so much. And I always credit Hans Zimmer for this. Hans Zimmer in like the Dark Knight movies, because they introduced, like, I don't know if this was just Hans Zimmer in general or if it was like Christopher Nolan, but like the scenes when like there's void of sound, or it's just like one string playing on a violin, like real, and it's like that humming sound. I feel like that's been replicated so much in movies since then. And you get a little bit of that here, or just like I said, void of like music or sound, like when they're on the beach and you just hear like the water rushing over, like stuff is like just as important to me sometimes as music. Like you're letting that scene breathe in a way that you wouldn't if you're just like, oh, I got to throw music into this scene because I do it for all the other ones, So sound and score were amazing.
Yeah, I think as well, Eternals rectified for me what was one of the biggest crimes the Marvel movies have ever done, and that is not have Rami come back since Iron Man 1. He did Iron Man 1 in what is, for me, one of the best scores, if not the best score in all these movies. And then for some reason didn't bring him back for 2 and 3. Like, those themes are incredible in Iron Man 1, and none of them ever got developed, and that forever is like just an absolute crime to me. So to see him get his name attached to Eternals and then hear him kick ass like he did, I was like, you show them what they bloody missed out on.
Those themes are so important because, like, when you get those scenes in Avengers and Endgame and Infinity War, when you hear that main theme of a hero before you see them, and you know who it's going to be because you recognize.
And that annoys me so much. Like, even just recently, like Venom, Venom's composer was different, so he didn't have the same sound as the first one. And I'm like, oh my god, what is this? This is like basics.
I did appreciate that, like Spider-Man 1 to Spider-Man 2, and talk about the Sam Raimi movies, that they had Danny Elfman do the first one, and then he only did part of 2, but they kept the essence there. So he still
No,
had
I think he did 2. I think it was 3 he did part of, and then he got like basically someone else came in, took his work, and then kind of went on with it. But I think he did 2.
I thought it was 2. But yeah, so they still kept the essence there to where, like, you know, they didn't completely just obliterate it and change it and say like, well, we got a new composer, we're paying him, might as well have him write new music.
Yeah, well, it's like we were saying, like 1 to 2, the themes from 1 are still in 2, but they're just developed. There's more to them because it's a different movie. Like if Peter's going through a hard time, we've now got the theme from the first one, but now we got to play it going through a hard time. It helps signify how you should feel, but it also helps you should be able to listen to music and know what's going on screen.
Yeah,
that's what I always think.
And that's something that we both share in common, that we enjoy, is good film scores for that reason. And I think if we do any more of these movie talks, we'll probably dive into that a little bit more too. But we both like listening to film scores while we read too. I think that adds a layer to the comic book reading experience as well.
That's a part that's missing from comics. For me, that's a big part that's missing from comics.
Yeah, I agree. I think just reading in general too. I think novels could do the same thing, prose novels, but
yeah.
Potentially a conversation for another day. But we want to hear from you guys. So definitely drop your comments down below. Let us know your thoughts on Eternals. Keep them spoiler free if you can, I guess, to not spoil anybody else that's in the comments, but or maybe do a timestamp thing and say like, oh yeah, I agree with you on this part. Whatever you want to do. But please also give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We're still kind of on an odd schedule of when we're releasing videos, so it's all the more reason why you should be hitting the notification bell, because then you'll get notified right away whenever a new video pops up. I know that Connor and Paperback Dan have a video coming up with their poll list and their hauls for the week and that kind of thing. I think Connor, and I'm going to subject him to making him look at my haul from the week, because I can't be a part of that video. So that'll be a later video to look forward to as well. But yeah, so thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Connor, for joining me.
No problem. Thank you. It was a good chat.
Yeah, so Eternals, go see it, watch our video, share this video with your friends, let us know what we're doing over here. See you later.